Okay, welcome to Free Will, Science, and Religion. My name is George Ortega. I'm here with Chandler Klebs, Trick Slattery, Mitch J, David Joseph, and Jamie Soden. And we are going to explore the concept of order relative to the laws of nature, in a naturalistic perspective, because basically the implication of we as human beings not having a free will is that something or some being, however we want to describe it, is making us or compelling us to do what we do. One answer might be, well, we simply do what we do, and there's no particular reason why. That's kind of like, well, that's one philosophy. It's simply something that we do. I think a more scientific, more naturalistic way to look at this is like there's whether we want to describe it as causality, the laws of nature, there's an entity that is responsible, quote unquote, for all our actions. And so I want to explore this relative to order because basically I think some people believe that there's such a thing as both order and disorder, and that disorder can give rise to order, meaning that most fundamentally there wouldn't be a reason or rationale or plan or design for anything, that things just evolve without any explanation. Whereas, like, if we take the position that there must be a fundamental order, then our thinking in terms of what is fundamentally controlling everything shifts from an arbitrary kind of like, I'm not sure how to describe it, just almost random kind of process, to something that has that has governance, that has a certain kind of even sentience or knowledge about what it does. So, all right, so that's basically the premise of it. Who wants to start?
I
Let's
would,
define what we mean. Go ahead, Mitch.
well, do the definition first, probably. It's probably
Yeah,
more
yeah,
appropriate.
let's define what we mean by order, and see if we're in agreement that first, what is order, and can disorder give rise to order? Because I think that that's a very important, question, relative to what is making us do what we do.
Okay, so how do we define order?
All right, I would define order as what what directs the behavior of matter. I mean, like, basically the universe is matter moving through space, just like these forces that act upon it. So order I would define as what the laws of nature give rise to, without which, nothing would be happening in any kind of way that could be understood, or it's even difficult to conceive of a universe without order.
Do you differentiate the difference between order and cause and effect, or are they pretty much synonymous here?
I think cause and effect is the process that by which order manifests. In other words, whether order is, for example, like the laws of nature, whether it's gravity or the other forces, but the more underlying or fundamental law of nature that pretty much governs all of them, in terms of how they evolve, would be cause and effect.
Okay, so let me just interject here. So, just to center this on free will for the listeners. I mean, George already explained it, but just to make it really clear, because we did touch on a lot of issues in the last few minutes. When one investigates the issue of free will, and one says, okay, if I'm not responsible for what I do, who is? That's what leads us to this path of trying to figure out who is responsible for what. What party is responsible? Now, from my perspective, it's very simple. It's very clear. As human beings, there's certain phenomena that we are inextricably linked to. One of them is curiosity. We have this intense curiosity, and it seems like we could never be satisfied. Furthermore, we have an obsession with agency. We have an obsession with saying, I did this, you did this, what did this? But just because we desire those things doesn't mean that's the way reality is. It doesn't mean there is an agent. It doesn't mean an agent is meaningful. It doesn't mean that we have answers to all the questions we might posit, all the questions we might pose. To me, the answer is simple. There is no agents. Agency is an illusion. It's not a real thing. It's just something people are obsessed with.
All right, but Mitch, before we go to the topic of agency, let's stay with this question of order to see if we can reach agreement on it. In other words, do we believe that disorder can give rise to order?
Oh, well, okay, so going back to order, so what science does is science, as we often say, gives us the best reasons for explaining the way things are. And there are things that we know and things that we do not know. And we work really, really hard to try to have a thorough, deep explanation of the things of which we have a great deal of empirical evidence for, things that hold up to the scrutiny of scientific rigor. Scientifically, the word order has an abundance of meanings over a wide variety of disciplines. And your particular philosophical perspective, I don't think it really comes into play with with several different mathematical definitions or different definitions that exist even within different areas of physics. So to
But
me, it's just something that's very unclear. Yeah.
but just to clarify, George, what would you consider something that is disorder?
Well, actually, I just like found a wiki article on where in physics, the thermodynamics, they're actually now, dispensing with the word disorder because it is ambiguous. It has various meanings that
Right.
confuse students, and so like what I would equate disorder with randomness. That it's a quote an apparent phenomenon. Things appear disordered simply because we don't understand as well, what gives rise to them as we do, this phenomenon that we would describe as quote unquote ordered.
So a true disordered event would be an acausal event, correct? And that's pretty much it. A random event,
Or
an
in
event
a
without a
certain sense,
cause.
yes, and in a certain sense, yes. In other words, like there's no evidence, for example, like the argument for acausality is that it's possible, it's logically possible, but there is no evidence for it. Again, if we were to relate the concept of disorder to randomness, we'd have to conclude the same, that there's no real evidence for anything being disordered,
Right. Well,
but
let's just stay away from that for a second because I think whether or not there's evidence, you brought up the question of can order arise from disorder, right? So
right.
so basically, you're saying is can acausal events that pop into existence give rise to causality? And I would say I don't see a problem with that. Is that maybe I don't
Well,
maybe I'm misunderstanding
well,
the question.
but all right, Mitch, when I mean, Trick, when you posit a causality, you're basically, positing it as a possibility. In other words, like there can be, pretty logically, no evidence for something happening without a cause. The best we can always arrive at with that is that something is happening about which we don't know what is causing it. Basically, like that's, and like so we have this mountainous, body of evidence of so much that we know the causal mechanisms about, and then we have a few instances. Actually, there's many, because like when you get to a certain level in chemistry, in physics, in biology, in whatever discipline of science you want to consider, there's always going to be a point at which we are ignorant of the causal factors or mechanisms of some kind of fundamental process. But, again, we tend to kind of like conclude that it's ignorance. We're ignorant of the factors, not that there's nothing, we don't conclude that nothing is causing these things. We simply conclude that we don't know what is causing them. So basically, my point is like the argument for acausality is simply, it can only be based on like that it's a logical possibility, but the flaw or the weakness with that kind of our argument is that you could apply it to anything. You could say that it's a logical possibility that we're not having this podcast, that the universe doesn't exist, So
Yeah,
it's
but
a
you got to
very
understand that it does go back to the whole if everything's infinite or not. So and that's a logical possibility as well. If everything's infinite, that's a logical possibility. If everything isn't infinite, then yes, an acausal event had to have happened at some point somewhere.
Also,
Um,
just to be clear, the only things that are logically possible are those things that are logically possible. There are things that are logically impossible because they violate whatever we say logic is.
right, like
Just to
A
make,
equals
yeah,
A. Right, A cannot
yeah.
equal B. Right.
so I guess the question is, could order come from a singular acausal event? I would say yes, or it could come from an infinite event. But both are kind of unintuitive, I'd say.
All right, but Trick, I'm not following where a causality fits into whether the universe is either infinite or finite. Because like in other words, like, or temporally, let's say we assume that the universe had a beginning. So I
Correct.
guess you're saying that like that beginning wasn't caused.
I'm saying if it was caused, then you have a line that extends from prior to the Big Bang, for example, and it's just an infinite line basically. So you either have an infinite line or a circular line or something like that, or you have an acausal event. So those are your two options there. So and I don't see either of those options having a problem with your conception of order. Like I say, either of them could lead to ordered events after the fact, basically.
Okay, let's say I accept that
Okay.
logically that the with the premise that the universe had a beginning, we'd have to like conclude that it must be an acausal beginning. But how would that relate to the process of order? Because it would seem like how could order, or so basically what you're saying is that order that order, the disorder and randomness or acausality are pretty much synonymous, and like the disorder
I'm saying
could.
once a disordered event comes into existence, it can then interact orderly. It can then have causal influence, which what is what we considered ordered after that.
Okay, I think we can simplify this discussion somewhat, because like when we get to the point of whether the universe was temporally finite, whether it's eternal, or whether it had a beginning, I think we have to concede that transcends logic. I don't think logic can answer that question. So I think
I so
if
so this is where our disagreement stems from here. Okay, I am in the Laplacian kind of camp. I have no need of that hypothesis. That's where I am. I am very much interested, especially in big issues such as the issue of free will, because it's important, right? We always give me that quote from Searle that we often state that it's the most important issue of our day, right? And I think I am convinced that we know enough about the issue to come to the conclusion it's bogus, it is illogical, it is incoherent. And it's a very good thing if we recognize this and move on with our society in such a way where we acknowledge that free will is bogus. When we start saying things like transcends logic, or we're talking about order in a way that is not in a particular discipline, it's very difficult for me to get on board with that. I think there's
well,
just way too much ambiguity, and I think it's really unnecessary. I don't think it's necessary. So that's the whole point too. It's like, why is it needed, right? So George, you originally said it like the issue here is that you're investigating free will and you want to attribute an agent to someone. You're saying who is doing this, and that's what leads you to thinking about the universe and the origins of the universe, and that leads you to the idea of order because you think order is a fundamental component of this investigation. Where from my perspective, I go, nah, not really. That doesn't really work.
Mitch, it goes far beyond that. In other words, like, one thing we can completely agree on is that there are laws of nature, physical laws of nature that govern the universe, the physical universe. These physical laws give rise to order. In other words, order can be like, basically redefined or made more specific to various scientific disciplines, but the most general and all encompassing understanding of order is that it is what makes things happen via the laws of nature.
Is it necessary to say that? Why is that
Well,
necessary to say?
it's
Yeah,
not
you got to
only
understand.
necessary, it's axiomatic. It's something that science, all of science basically derives from these laws of nature.
The laws of nature aren't really axiomatic. Like we even have like a multi-universe theory where we think that cosmologically anyway. Not I'm not talking about the quantum type of multiverse thing, which is totally different discussion. But the cosmological multiverse theory is in which multiple universes exist and give rise to each other, basically, where we come from another universe, and in each of those, they could have different laws of physics. They could be totally different. The laws of gravity or whatnot could be um, juxtaposed to our own universe. So I think that's just another causal factor.
Well,
Is
but
that we're understanding that these are the laws of physics in our known universe are a specific causal factor. Basically, it's a specific configuration of our universe is all.
But Trick, even if we were to go there, they like to posit multiple universes, we would be considering the same thing as we're considering with the unification of physics, that we have like certain like relativity and quantum mechanics, and there's certain elements that don't, aren't completely understandable, So we're attempting an explanation that includes both. And so in the same way, if with multiple universes, is we would still be looking for that unifying principle that explains them all. And that, again, is like one of the foundations of science, that like, science is about like understanding things at a more and more and more fundamental level. So, but again, like getting back to this, the concept of order, I think maybe we still need to explore what we mean by order and see if we could reach an agreement that order is what governs the universe. That like without order, there would be no laws of nature.
See, to me,
Um,
that's kind of like cart before the horse. It's to me, it's the other way around. We observe order. It's not that order governs things. It's just that we the things that happen to be ordered.
I
It's
agree with Trick here. Again, it's avoiding the agency, just talking about the action. Things are happening.
all right, but in science, we know that things don't quote unquote just happen. There's an explanation, and that's where causality comes in. That's where the empirical method comes in. Of the the scientific
Right,
method.
right, right. But even when we talk about causes, causes aren't really things. Causes are other actions. It's really right when we're talking about the dominoes being knocked down, we're talking about a force on a force on a force on a force on a force. So as humans, are often we are it's inescapable. We're stuck with our habit of creating agents, of saying that entity did it. But as you alluded to, George, science, in particular physics, is about understanding things on a more fundamental, in a more fundamental way. And when you look at it in a more fundamental way, what it really comes down to is matter. But matter is actually energy. They are the same. They go from one to the other. So there aren't really things. We make up things to help us describe what is happening because it's difficult for us to
but
comprehend the
let's
way the
say me
universe
and Mitch
is.
actually agreed with you, George, that everything was ordered. Like we knew that everything was ordered. We knew that there was no such thing as an acausal event. What does that mean? What are you trying to assess based on that?
Okay, so like basically, so everything is ordered, and then we kind of like we try to explore and understand the attributes of order. What does order imply? There's certain implications of our not having a free will, and we explore those. So like, what are the implications of order? And they relate to the laws of nature, the fact that the laws of nature they govern everything, and to know everything, to govern everything in a certain sense, one has to know everything. Let me try to Because
Okay.
Trick, to answer that question, I basically, I haven't gone that far specifically in terms of like what the implication is, but I thought that,
Okay.
if we could get on board in terms of that disorder is simply, just like randomness, it's an appearance that fundamentally, as far as we know, our best knowledge, um, tells us that everything is ordered and nothing is, for example, random,
I have a
then
feeling that
from
Mitch would probably agree with me that there is a strong possibility that everything is caused, that everything is deterministic, that there's, that is quite a possibility. So if we accept that, let's say axiomatically, then we kind of figure out, well, what does that really mean? Why are we saying, what does it matter that everything is ordered? What is
all
the
right,
difference
so
between that and a causal event happening and creating the order that we see basically?
all right, let me then let me relate order to a quality that we ordinarily attribute only to, let's say, human beings and other similar life forms, and that quality is intelligence. In other words, like, how does order relate to intelligence? Can we, you know, these laws of nature, the physical laws, the chemical laws, the various kind of like disciplines, the biological laws, they all kind of like fit together, and work together under, I guess, some guiding, physical laws, I imagine. But can we, how can we not ascribe intelligence to this governing process, or this governing entity that is actually making everything happen, including everything that we humans would describe that we do as intelligent?
Now this is
So
where I think you're jumping the gun a little, because I don't know how you get from order to intelligence.
Okay, well, let's apply order and intelligence to a human act. Like we would define something that we humans do as intelligent, more intelligent, less intelligent. I think based on, the complexity of the order, the kind of the what it manifests. Some things, for example, like creating a computer, are manifestly much more ordered, more complex, more quote unquote intelligent than, let's say, our adding, one rock to the second rock and concluding we have two rocks.
Well, I
So
think we all
basically,
agree that brain states are ordered. Like we understand that our brain states that create our consciousness are ordered states that you know when we do things, it's a causal part of our brain structure. Basically, that's creating this quote unquote intelligence. But when we get outside of those brain states and into rocks rolling down hills, that's still um, ordered in the sense that you're talking about. But it's not. There's no way. There's no reason for us to project the one type of order of the brain states happening onto the rock rolling down the hill.
Hey guys, I've been listening for all this time, and I just wanted to say, like, I think this is an issue of like satisfaction and our perception of what's ordered or disordered or intelligent or unintelligent. Because I think what the words are problematic because we say something is ordered when we understand why something's arranged a certain way, why something happened, and we call it disorder or random when we don't understand it. And similarly, we say that somebody's actions is intelligent or unintelligent based on our preferences of what we would think we would have done. And so I think we're on some very vague terms here that have too many meanings.
all right, Chandler, just we can't avoid, this subjective evaluation, interpretation, definition of phenomenon. That's, we're subjective beings, that we cannot avoid that. But like, science is about like reaching fundamental understandings, like, the universe has laws of nature that govern everything. Like, there's an inherent order in, like, for example, like the concept of entropy. Things always go from order to quote unquote disorder. You know, these are not like issues of quote unquote satisfaction. These are issues of our best available evidence. So I don't think I don't think it'd be right to say we're just arbitrarily trying to satisfy our different life philosophies or world philosophies.
Well, that's a good point. I mean, sorry, Chandler, but just to support Chandler for a second here. I mean, just and also to recenter the discussion for any listeners who might have gotten lost along the way. It seems like it's my job to keep just to keep doing that.
Hmm.
So just let's retrace our steps again. So a person is investigating the issue of free will, and that leads to a very natural question about, well, if I'm not responsible for what I'm doing, who is responsible? And George is suggesting, well, here is the perspective of the universe that one should take. Here is the perspective of the universe that you should have, which clearly is a pantheistic viewpoint because it's a perspective of the universe where you're attributing qualities to the universe. You're saying the universe is conscious and intelligent, and there's this fundamental principle called order. And you're saying these are the things that you would naturally go to. You have that question about who's responsible for what you do? Well, I'll tell you what, the universe is responsible. The universe is conscious, the universe is intelligent, and there's this really strange fundamental principle of order that governs it. And I think Trick and I are saying, well, you have no need for that. The definitions are unclear. I don't think, a bunch of, yeah, amongst other things, we're saying there's no need for it and that it's a very unclear path to go on. I don't think the free will investigator necessarily has to go to that path. I think the simpler path is just that no one is responsible. And what the universe is whatever we currently know it is, the best we can say about it right now, based on scientific rigor and evidence. And if the scientists aren't saying what you are saying, it seems to suggest that it's not as clear as you may believe it to be.
All right, well, before I suggested that a part of this is just a matter of semantics. In other words, like I might describe the universe as a being where you might describe it as a thing.
Well, George, let me ask you, what is it that you think that person who is investigating free will, who is, had that question, who's responsible for that, what path must they go to? What path are you suggesting they go to? What answers are you providing them? What are you saying for
Well,
those
let me
people?
finish
Yeah.
my basic description of the semantic difference before going to that. Um, Basically, the reason I hold the universe to be a being, and again, whether it's a being or a thing, it is a semantic distinction. Is that we define the universe as being everything. Everything that is the universe. There's the known universe that is, that has a beginning at the Big Bang and has certain parameters, whatever. But then there's the universe that we define as everything. And so, like when we look at, because basically, essentially, we're comparing theism to science. And so when we look at our most basic definition of God, we conclude that God is everything. The second most fundamental understanding of our universe is that it is governed by these laws of nature that are quote unquote all powerful. They can't make 1 + 1 = 3, but what can be done must always be attributed to these laws of nature. So again, semantically, we can describe these laws of nature as an omnipotent, all-powerful God. So,
Uh,
so that when I say that that this question is simply a matter of semantics, there's a clear equivalence between the preceding understanding of God that preceded science and the description of the universe as everything and all powerful or governing everything.
I wouldn't consider everything that is causal the fact that you're causally constricted to be omnipotent. And in fact, I'd say it was the opposite of that. You have no power at that point. You have to do what you have to do, basically.
Yeah, Trey, could you restate that? I'm not sure I understood
Yeah, I
what
mean,
you asked.
when you use the word omnipotent, you're basically saying all powerful, and I'm saying that something that is causally has to be the way it has to be doesn't
Good
have the
point.
power to be anything other than the way it has to be.
I
So
agree.
so it's the opposite of omnipotent. It's basically restricted. It's confined to no power, basically.
Okay, Trick, I would agree if you apply that to anything and everything within the universe. But when you apply it to the universe in its entirety, then we would have to conclude the opposite, that the universe, the laws of nature, are the only power.
It would be kind of like saying that you're omnipotent because you have to do what you have to do. So you're omnipotent to your body, but that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It's you're just if you're causally restricted, you're the opposite of omnipotent.
Well, again, Trick, you want to make a distinction between the universe, which is everything, and everything within the universe, which would include me and other subjective beings. So you're right. I mean, your argument applies to somebody like me that, I cannot be omnipotent because, like, I'm controlled by these laws of nature which
Well,
represent the
I'm saying
universe.
you're not even omnipotent towards the organs in your body, just as the universe isn't omnipotent towards the happenings in the universe. So it's the same type of thing.
Right, but why would you say that? In other words, like, I can clearly understand how I wouldn't be omnipotent about anything, but how could you apply that to the universe when our most fundamental scientific understanding is that the laws of nature govern everything?
Because the laws of nature couldn't do something otherwise. The laws of nature would have to have the power to be able to do otherwise. If it can't do otherwise, then it doesn't have the power to do otherwise, and it's not omnipotent.
Hey, I have to agree with Trick here because the idea of power or control or this sort of thing always implies that that there is an agent that could have chosen otherwise than they in fact did. And so I feel like this turns into a very theological thing for like God believes. It turns into, well, why didn't God create a universe without pain? Which is to say that there is something all powerful that could have done differently. But this podcast is all about that nobody has a free will to have done otherwise than what causality or the acausality, if you put that in there, would have caused them to do.
And Chandler,
Right.
let's say I agree with you. I agree with you that, like, just as we human beings do not have a free will because we could not have done otherwise, we can apply that to the universe. Yeah, maybe the universe cannot have done otherwise, but manifest these laws of nature. Maybe the universe can't do otherwise, but what it does. But the difference between us and the universe is that we are governed by the universe, and the universe governs itself.
Well, I don't know because considering that the universe is everything that exists, including us, we are just as much the universe as the universe because we are the universe. So that's like basically saying that that the laws of physics and all the humans and other animals and plants that we all are God or we all are the universe or whatever. But considering nobody has the power to do any differently than they do, I think power is as meaningless a term as free will or self control or something.
I agree with you
Well, then, I mean,
wholeheartedly.
like, are you saying, but then you're basically negating the laws of nature because according to our best science, the laws of nature have power over everything.
The laws of nature govern the universe. The universe doesn't govern the laws of nature. So this is it's you're kind of like reversing the two. The laws of nature are part of the universe that the universe has no control over. The universe doesn't govern the fact that it has the laws of nature. It just happens to be those are the laws of nature within the universe that the universe has absolutely no control over having.
I think that maybe the way you're using the word power is different than the rest of us.
That's exactly what I was just about to say. When you say that it has power, that's why I wanted you to explain.
Okay, gravity, a universal law of nature that has power over all matter in the universe. The power is that it attracts matter to matter.
Define power, though. How do you mean that it has?
Power is, basically fundamental, complete compulsion. In other words, like power is governance. It basically determines what must be and what cannot be.
Well, the only power that could exist is causality, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, causality, Chandler, is the process, and yeah, we could describe it as a power per se, but causality, basically allows the other, like, let's say, more specific powers, like the various laws of nature, to manifest. In other words, like the law of gravity manifests in a causal manner. So causality, I think, in a certain sense, is more of the process by which things happen than the power by which things happen, although it's a subtle distinction.
And what if you just don't say that?
Well, then, I mean, science is about understanding why things happen as they do.
Science is about building the best possible model you can have, in particular for prediction. That's the goal. And I don't see how this would help in that
Well,
case.
no, Mitch. I mean, like science, there's a kind of like a basic science that it's not at all concerned with prediction. It simply wants to know because it wants to know.
I strongly disagree with that. I
I actually agree
think
with George on this part.
I go ahead, please.
I'm sorry. Science, yeah, a lot of science is about predictive powers, but that's not all science. Like for example, us learning about evolution. Um, that does give us predictive powers in biology and things like that, but that's not the reason. I mean, we learn evolution because it's something that we want to know about our history, basically. The
Well, that would
even
be
even
history.
cosmology is all about learning about what happened in the past. It's not really. I mean, a lot of them could be helpful to some predictive things in the future, but not necessarily. It's about us wanting to learn about something.
Well, here's my take on this. I think this is an issue of satisfaction once again. It's because we're curious, like Mitch was saying. We want to know something, so we want to know the history, we want to know why things happen. But I think for the most part, some of us aren't so curious about why things happen, except for how that knowledge enables us to do what we actually want to do and change things. And I'm not so sure that all the science out there or all the religion out there is satisfactory, or it's not practical is what I'm saying.
Can we go back to the question of order? I mean, because like, are we in agreement in terms of what order is?
I don't think so.
Well,
I
we
don't.
could accept your definition. I mean, obviously, in physics, there's different definitions. Like you talked about. For example, in thermodynamics, we talk about how the universe in the before the Big Bang was ordered heat wise. It was all in one place, and then it got distributed, and that's considered disordered, and then eventually it'll all disperse evenly, and then that's considered ordered again. So when we're talking about that, we're saying that we, as per your definition of ordered biological configurations that are causally ordered, are actually disordered thermodynamically in the universe because it's in little pockets here and there, basically. So
Right,
that's
and
the
that
difference. So
exactly, and that's why I suggested, like, and again, like I referred to this tendency now in physics to dispense with the word disorder in thermodynamics, because it does confuse the issue. To all right, there's a fundamental there are various fundamental meanings of order that are then applied to different disciplines. One, I'm reading from Merriam-Webster, the arrangement of objects or events in space and time. Okay, so like in other words, like what happens is like our universe is not randomly structured. Our reality is not randomly, manifest. It basically expresses and manifests this arrangement that I would describe as fundamental order. The things have to be the way they are. They're structured, and assembled the way they are. And then when we ask why, then we go to, well, because the laws of nature dictate or mandate this order.
Well, it sounds like everything is ordered in that sense because everything has to be the way it is due to causality.
Right, and that's of course we're all just accepting that axiom for the sake of argument that everything is causal. For the sake of argument, if everything is causal, yeah, that is the case. But that doesn't imply any kind of, I guess, panpsychism or anything like that of the universe, knowing the events
Well,
that are going to take place.
well, what's happening? I mean, George. I mean, please correct me if I'm wrong. Like instantly, you are offering pantheism. In fact, a very particular form of pantheism to curious investigators of free will. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm not directly doing that right now. Right now, I'm trying
Yeah,
to.
indirectly. So I want you to be more direct, I guess. This is what I'm because
Well,
that's what
let's
I'm.
let's save that for, because, like, if I'm going to like present a kind of like an understanding or a series of points that lead to an objective, I want to kind of like make sure we're clear on these premise points. For example, the first thing I want to kind of like establish is that, like, that order governs the universe, and that there is no fundamental disorder. That disorder is simply our ignorance of the governing aspects of whatever we're considering.
Let's talk about the term govern, because that's one of those words that implies certain things. So what do you mean when you say govern?
Okay, the laws of nature govern the universe, meaning the laws of nature make what happens happen and prevent what they prohibit from happening from happening.
So they constrain things. The laws of nature, everything is constrained by the laws of nature, and that's all you mean by govern, correct?
Well, yes.
That's fine. Yeah, I don't think anyone would disagree with that.
All right, so then are we in agreement then, like, this is a fundamental attribute of the universe, and so that the concept or prospect of disorder leading to order, would be in contradiction to that?
No, only if we're accepting that everything is ordered, basically. So it doesn't necessarily, if we're accepting that everything is ordered just for the sake of argument, then it doesn't necessarily mean that it's in contradiction that everything, that disorder happens. It just means that we're accepting it
Well, I mean, like,
axiomatic.
then can we say then that, like, all of our, because basically science is not about proof. Science is about, like, preponderance of evidence,
Correct.
observation, evidence, analysis. So can we say that, like, pretty much all evidence, physical evidence that we have, suggests order, and absolutely no evidence that we have, empirical evidence at least, suggests a fundamental disorder?
Well, since it seems like for something to be disordered, you would have to have like true acausality.
By asking that question, George, you're going to bring us into the topic of quantum physics, which I don't think we really need to go there. But
Well, no,
yeah,
no, but Trick, no, no, it's important because quantum physics has confused so many people. In other words, like, the claim of indeterminism, meaning a causality in quantum physics, is a claim founded purely on ideology and not on evidence. In other words, like, take any kind of quantum phenomenon that a physicist might claim is indeterministic, meaning acausal, and the best evidence that scientist could provide is that we don't know what is causing this phenomenon, so we are ideologically or philosophically describing it as uncaused. In other words, there's absolutely no evidence that would lead us to conclude that any kind of quantum phenomenon is uncaused.
Right, but there's no evidence that it's caused either.
Well,
That's the
wait, no,
problem
no,
with quantum
trick.
physics.
That no, no.
You can't postulate all the fact that we see all evidence, that of all of other events that aren't quantum events as causal onto quantum events and say, oh well, since the classical realm everything is appears causal to us, that means the quantum event is causal. And I'm not saying it's not causal, so don't get me wrong here, but we just can't postulate that. There's
But
no. Go ahead.
trick, even within quantum mechanics, there's only certain phenomenon that we might describe as potentially being acausal. For example, like radioactive decay. We don't know the rate at which a single isotope is going to decay. So some scientists have said, well, then this is an example of an acausal process or potentially a causal process. But the vast majority of not just classical but quantum phenomenon we understand in terms of their causality.
Well, yeah, but we know that some events, based on the calculations for how those events happen, we know that they have to either be non-local, which has its own problems. And I'm not talking about entanglement here. We're just talking about a non-local event. So it's something that's happening from a distance, causally affecting that event, or acausal. We know that those are the two options, and the third option of it being classically causal, that the kind of causality that we actually see in the classical realm isn't there. So we know that it's going to be one of these two. The problem is we just don't know which one it is, so we can't really postulate 100% that it is the non-local cause that's happening. Though
Right,
I intuitively probably think it is.
right, trick. And let's say we apply Occam's razor to this. I think it seems much more reasonable to suppose that action at a distance, this non-locality, is the explanation, since it doesn't violate any of the laws of nature, it doesn't violate relativity. Whereas, like, the prospect of acausality not only just goes against the vast body of scientific evidence we have both in the quantum and classical world, but it also violates various laws of physics, like the law of conservation of charge, conservation of mass energy, conservation of momentum. So again, this prospect of acausality in quantum mechanics, while it exists as a logical possibility, it essentially has no empirical evidence to support it, whereas like non-locality, has no empirical evidence to deny it.
Now, I don't know the physics involved with this, but the people that do propose that those events do happen say that it doesn't actually go against those laws. That basically those are conservation laws that are long-term laws, and that somehow the event is able to distribute the energy. So
George,
go
do you
ahead.
think you could like summarize this perspective on reality for us?
All right,
Like,
so basically, yes.
what are the important
if
parts? What is
if
the
we if we conclude that that order is the, let's say, fundamental attribute of the universe, that is expressed by the laws of nature and that govern everything, then in terms of like our understanding why we do what we do, then we have to ascribe everything we human beings do not to a free will, but to the universe.
we have
To
to or we should?
Well, logic would mandate that we do.
So we should.
Well, again, should is kind of like a moralistic, implicate, kind of term. So like
Well, do you promote that
basically I'm
idea
saying
though?
that, oh,
Do you
certainly,
promote it?
certainly, yes, absolutely. In other words, if we want to be logical, if we want to be scientific, we would have to conclude that we humans do what we do not because of a free will, but because the universe is compelling us to do what we do.
And the universe does what it does not because of free will as either. It just does what it does because that's what it has to do. So it's
Well,
it's no difference between the universe and us. Basically, we're just part of the universe.
Well, Trick, there may be one difference, and this again goes back to a part of reality that we're not accessible to. In other words, like, yes, the universe is constrained by its own laws to act the way it does in the present. So there's clearly no free will. You know, it's causal. In other words, like what happened at the Big Bang is completely causally determining what the universe does now. But then the question still remains, you know, did the universe, like at a certain undefinable point in the past, have the freedom to decide, to determine how its laws would govern itself and all that? And again, I can't answer that. That seems to be beyond what logic can understand.
I think it's not beyond logic. I think it's illogical just as much as it's illogical that that we are able to do that.
Well, I mean, the difference between us and the universe is that, like, we are governed by the universe, whereas the universe governs itself.
Yeah, but the idea of causality, the concept of causality, isn't something that necessitates the laws of the physical laws of the universe. It's just that it's a logical concept rather than a physical concept. So we don't need to go into the whole physics of it. We could say that a cause can't be both the cause of A and also be the cause of not A, which is B instead.
Well,
So
wait a minute,
this is a logical contradiction.
Trick, are you saying that the causality is a logical and not a physical concept?
Yes, definitely.
But wait a minute, when we consider, again, this, you know, scientifically, according to our best knowledge, the evolution of the universe, and if we're to consider the universe a physical entity, then I think we'd have to conclude that the universe at the moment of the Big Bang caused the universe at the subsequent moment, and that state of the universe caused the subsequent one. So in other words, like you have, you know, one thing, one being, this universe, you know, causing its subsequent evolution.
Why is the universe one thing?
By definition, it has to be. I mean, like uni means one.
Wait, okay.
That's true.
No. That's just a word that we made up. It's not it's not a definition. That's a label that we attach to the universe. It's not that's there's a distinction there, okay? That's
All
just
right,
what.
so
Anyway, let's go back to this causality thing because it's kind of important because yes, I say causality is a logical concept, but we also infer it in what we perceive in the universe. We actually never see causality in the universe. We see correlation in which we infer this concept of causality onto, which is an important concept. So we see, you know, a correlation between striking a match and the fire on the end of the match. And if we do it 1,000 times, it always happens, or maybe one time it doesn't happen due to the match being wet or something. But we infer that a cause is happening. We never actually see the actual molecular
That's
structure
true.
and everything that's happening for that causal structure. We infer it onto it. So the concept of causality itself is kind of a logical construct that we impose onto our perceptions of reality. But it also applies to pretty much any event that we think comes from something else. So when you say an event comes from something, like the universe is able to decide between A or B, and it could have done otherwise or whatnot, then it's a logical construct that doesn't fit. It basically creates a self contradiction there.
How does this subject of order and the universe and all the stuff you guys have been talking about, how does this help us in our everyday lives? Because that's what I'm looking for and I'm not finding it.
all right, so basically, we want to make a better world, you know, by promoting this knowledge that we don't have a free will. But one of the strongest implications of our not having a free will is that things are not up to us, you know, and so like a certain kind of logic dictates that if they're not up to us, they have to be up to something, someone, something, some being. Now, here's the problem: is Mitch was talking about this issue of responsibility, which is central to the free will question. That basically what we're saying is that we're not fundamentally morally responsible for either the good we do or the evil that we do. Now, here's our problem. Here's our challenge. We've got a world where, like, for example, in the United States, 80 to 90% of the population believe in God or a higher power. And so basically what we're telling the world is that, like, the evil that we human beings do is not our evil, and logical extension by the understanding of most people in the world would mean that, it has to be the evil of the universe, of God. So basically, essentially, what we're leading people to understand is that, like, God is not all good as most people would prefer to believe, but God must be both good and evil. And so, like, the value of our kind of like understanding words like order and causality and, the laws of nature is that in order for us to ultimately succeed in gaining the acceptance that we don't have a free will by the world, so that we can create a world without, blaming ourselves and others and create a much, much better world, we have to, like, find some way to address this logical extension.
I have a way to address it. How about God doesn't exist and no one's responsible for anything?
But you can't mix, like, when you define God as everything and all powerful,
I'm not
and you
defining
define,
God. I'm
no,
not
no,
even. I have no need for that hypothesis.
I have a question, George.
There's no
Do
need.
do you think that people would be more receptive to the idea that, I'm talking about people that already believe in God, would be more receptive to the idea that God doesn't exist, or do you think they'd be more receptive to the idea that God is evil? Because I don't know, they seem pretty close to me, and I'm not sure which one they would actually be more receptive to on that. Because denoting that God is evil, he is the cause of all the evil in the world is it, I think, even bigger problem for a lot of theists than just abandoning the idea altogether. So I'm not
Trick,
sure that they'll
that
be
is a
receptive
very
to
good
that.
question. That's a very good question. I'm not sure I know the answer, but one thing that I can posit is that, like, what we define as evil is what we define to cause pain or suffering, and that basically this experience in our universe, at least according to our knowledge, is relatively recent. Well, I mean, like, I don't know, life is 4 billion years old. I don't know how old sentient life is, but without sentient life, these elementary molecules, these organisms, I don't think could experience either pleasure or pain. So there could not have been at that time in the universe, at least again, according to our knowledge, evil. So one way that we could explain it is that, like, that yes, evil exists today in the world because of some mistake in the evolutionary process. I think I'd prefer to refer to it as a mistake than as an intentional act, but that it's not necessarily a universal or eternal aspect of, let's say, our experience as human beings. But to answer your question, I think I think people, at this point, need to believe in God. But no, no, I can't answer it because then when I say that, I say I'm reminded, well, people need to believe in God because they define God as all good. So that's a very, very good question. All right, so yeah, so we've been discussing, basically the fundamental extension of our understanding that we humans don't have a free will. If we are not in control fundamentally of what we do, then to what/who do we attribute this control, and what are the implications of this understanding to how we see our world and each other, and how we interact in the world. And we're just beginning this exploration. Again, like, for most people, they're pretty much at the stage where they still need to understand that we don't have a free will, and they still need to understand that this knowledge has vast, profound implications on the nature of humanity and civilization. And so, like, we are kind of like now exploring what these implications may be. Okay, thanks for listening, and we'll be back with other episodes on free will, science, and religion. Thanks.